Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for General Grand Council Presents. Today, we have Jaime Paul Lamb, who is the author of Myth, Magic, and Masonry, Occult Perspectives in Freemasonry, and also Approaching the Middle Chamber, the 7 Liberal Arts in Freemasonry and the Western Esoteric Tradition. He is the member of Old Well St. John's Lodge number 6, Norwalk, Connecticut, and a charter member and worshipful master of Ascension Lodge number 89 in Phoenix, Arizona for 2021. A frater of both the Arizona College of the Societas Rosicruciana in Civitabus Federatis and the Hermetic Society of the GD. And I should ask that. And is a past master of Arizona Lodge of Research number 1 for 2016. Thanks everybody for coming. Thank you, Jaime, and take it away.
Thanks, brother Steve. Yeah, I sent you that bio. I didn't really look at it. It was just the one that I had most readily available in my email. No biggie. Well, good morning or good afternoon, brethren. It's a pleasure and honor to be here presenting for the General Grand Council. I really want to thank Brother Reed Fanning for getting in touch with me about this and setting this up, and Brother Steve for kind of facilitating here. And thank you all for showing up. I'm going to share my screen and we'll jump right into this presentation. All right, first, can everybody see that? Is that filling up your screen? And am I loud and clear? I can't see anybody, so.
So far, so good.
All right, sounds good. All right, we're going to jump right in. So the title of this presentation is Cryptic Cosmology. I wrote it specifically for this event. You know, I wanted to do something about the council and that suite of degrees, and there's really kind of a double entendre there, because cryptic cosmology, cryptic like the degrees, but cryptic because I believe that there's an underlying cosmological structure to these degrees that you know, and what I hope to offer in this presentation is a unique perspective on that body of degrees, and to show that there are allusions to the Aristotelian physics, the Ptolemaic cosmology, Kabbalistic cosmology, such as found in the Sefer Yetzirah and in the Zoharic kind of tree of life model that I'm sure many of you are familiar with, in the angelic or celestial hierarchies of Pseudo-Dionysius, and also sort of allusions to Dante's Paradiso. And I hope to kind of bring those out. Now, first, I should just preface this with, you know, what is cosmology? What do we mean in this context when we're talking about cosmology? And that would be, you know, the study of the cosmos, or the study of the nature of the cosmos, its organization and its sort of arrangement. That is the specific meaning that I'm using here in this presentation. How the universe is sort of arranged and organized, and how this particular paradigm of organization is present in the cryptic degrees. I've been focusing more and more on cosmological work, specifically because you know, once you start getting into a subject, you kind of see it everywhere. And there, you know, we see that cosmology really underlies a lot of theological systems, you know, like Genesis or the Pymander in the Hermetic cosmology, Neoplatonic cosmology, etc. It really underlies these these theological systems, as well as mythological systems, like when you say Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, you're talking simultaneously about the sky, the sea, and the underworld. So and they were each given part of this microcosmos to govern. And in philosophy, even, so much of philosophy, particularly natural philosophy, of course, is girded by these cosmological precepts, that predicate other forms of understanding, like the Aristotelian physics and its particular cosmological substratum, or its, underlying organizational principle. So that's kind of what we mean. That's why I feel it's important. That's the perspective that I hope to offer in this presentation. I'm going to be using primarily quotes from Mackey's Cryptic Masonry, which is a sort of monitorial look at that suite of degrees. And in the end, I think one of the big takeaways I hope to get across is that the temple is microcosmic. The temple is this cosmological sort of model in a lot of ways. So that's what I wanted to do for a preface there. Now, let's begin with just talking about vaults, the vault and the mountain, because the vault and the mountain figure prominently in the cryptic degrees. They're referenced, and it's the arrangement of things is vis-a-vis this vault and this mountain. So the vault we sometimes understand as being symbolic of the heart or the womb or the unconscious. It shares a lot of cave-like symbolism, and it has to do with the underworld. So everything that the underworld entails can be sort of projected onto the vault as a symbolic archetype, I guess, right? So this, let me turn this into a pointer. This on the right is the vault of the Adepti, or the vault of Christian Rosenkreuz. It's a certain vault used in a magical system, and here you could see that the Hebrew alphabet, the planets, and the signs, and the elemental glyphs. You see, like the air triangle here, the water triangle here, the fire triangle here. So these elemental, planetary, and zodiacal emblems in this vault kind of betray an underlying cosmological model. So that would be the most, kind of explicit way of saying, hey, this vault is cosmological, and it should be understood as such. There's also a certain eschatology with the vault in its symbolism, that it is sort of death and rebirth, as seen in Mithraism, for example, with the birthed out of a rock, and there's this cave, the grottos in which they met and held their communal meals and things. Also, of course, the popular cave in Christianity, in which Jesus was interred after the crucifixion. So you'll find that sort of cave or vault-like motif present in Pythagorean symbolism, all the way through Rosicrucian symbolism in the 17th century. And we see it in Masonry somewhat in the chamber of reflection, could be understood as sort of this crypt or this vault, having a liminal meaning, liminal as in like a threshold, an initiatory threshold. So speaking of mountains, conversely, right? So if we understand the vault as the underworld, we think of the mountain as the top of the terrestrial sphere. Like everything, well, yeah, the mountain would be the inverse of this vault cosmologically. You could look at it that way. And what is a mountain? It's a place where historically or theologically and mythologically, man has communed with the gods. Mount Sinai, Mount Zion, Mount Moriah. It is a place of pilgrimage. it's also in this middle panel here, we see Plato's spindle of necessity. So the mountain has been seen as the mundane axis, just like it is here in this model of Dante's Paradiso, the cosmology of Dante's Paradiso. And I know we're going to blur through this a little bit, but each of these points I'm going to unpack in further detail, and then at the end we're going to tie it up real nice. So don't feel like, hey, I'm not grasping this yet, but it's my aim to kind of get this point across. So the mountain is the top of the celestial sphere. It is the place through which the soul ascends through what they call the heptazone, which is these concentric planetary spheres. So again, this is essentially the Ptolemaic model. It was adopted by Christianity through Neoplatonism, and it is the sublunary sphere, that is the sphere below the moon, which is where the elements are, the Earth, the sphere of the Earth, essentially. So that's sublunary, below the moon. And then we have the moon, Mercury, Venus, the sun, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn before we get to the sphere of the fixed stars and the zodiac at the top. And we're going to go through this in more detail later, but I think it's important to understand the mountain as being the top of this sublunary sphere. So to wrap up this vault and mountain sequence, we see that there's sort of a triangular mirroring, right? Where we think of the elements, we think of the vault maybe as a downward pointing triangle that would emphasize earth and water, these downward pointing triangles. And then we have fire and air, these upward pointing triangles, maybe the mountain, because these are more rare elements, right? Because you have the earth as the lowest element in the Aristotelian natural place. It is the densest element. Water rests on top of the earth, air rests on top of water, and fire, being plasmic, kind of is lighter than air, so that's at the top of this sublunary sphere. And this is where we find, the mountain. So there's interesting symbolism with these sort of interlocked triangles having to do with this vault and this mountain cosmologically and elementally. So one thing I wanted to cover from Mackey's perspective that he talks about in the preface of Cryptic Masonry is the following. The super excellent master degree as such would impair the symmetry of the rite, which, as now constituted, presents an exact circle of the Masonic science, and which, from the apprentice's degree to the select masters, begins and ends in search of the true word, with which the super excellent alone of all the degrees has nothing to do. So the super excellent being essentially a 10th degree, right? Because you have 3 degrees in the Blue Lodge. You have 4 degrees in the Royal Arch, and then you have 3 degrees in the, is that right? Wait, 1 second. 3 degrees in the Blue Lodge, 4 degrees in Royal Arch, 7. So then you have 3 degrees in the cryptic degrees, in the council degrees. And then if you get rid of one of those, you have a total of 9. So that's the point he's trying to make, is that at the select master's degree, the true word is given, and this should seal what Mackey believes is a total system. The symmetry of the rite, he calls it. So when you are entrusted with this true word, that completes this 9-degree cycle, 3 times 3. So he emphasizes this, and I think he does this, as we'll see later. I think he does this because when we think of the number 9 and its cosmological kind of meaning, we think of the 9 Enochian arches. We think of the angelic hierarchies, right? The pseudo-Dionysian angelic hierarchies, which we'll get into. That's angels, archangels, principalities, powers, virtues, dominations, thrones, cherubim, and seraphim, forming this 9-leveled cosmological model. Divine truth, the knowledge of God, concealed in the old Kabbalistic doctrine under the symbol of his ineffable name, and typified in the Masonic system under the mystical expression of the true word, is the reward proposed to every Mason who has faithfully wrought his task. It is, in short, the master's wages, Mackey says. He goes on to say, so in that Kabbalistic doctrine, and with the ineffable name, or the tetragrammaton, as context, he goes on to say, blessed are they that do his commandments, that they have right to the tree of life and may enter in through the gates of the city. So in that Kabbalistic context, when we hear things like the gates of the city and the tree of life, there are certain things, there are certain allusions that are made, and they have a cosmological underpinning as well. So, for instance, the gates of the city, there are many cities, like utopian cities, that are usually solar. A prominent example being Thomas Campanella's Civitas Solis, which is the city of the sun, which was surrounded by 7 walls, right? And he makes it very explicit that this is a cosmologically ordered city, as does the city in the Arabic grimoire called the Picatrix. The Picatrix contains a city called Ado-Sentin, or Ado-Kenton. And this city is has a central sort of solar, so it's actually heliocentric. It has this central solar temple, and then around it are the concentric rings and various planetarily ordered structures, and then around those there's sort of a zodiacal fixed stars in the zodiac outside of these planetary spheres. So again, kind of alluding to this Ptolemaic cosmological model, which we see in the tree of life. Now, I'm sure most of you have seen this this diagram before. Down here, you have Malkuth, which represents the Earth, because this is a geocentric model. You have the Earth. Then you have Yesod, the sphere of the moon, which from the perspective of the Earth has the fastest transit across the ecliptic. So after that, you get Mercury, which is the second fastest. So this is what you call the Chaldean order of planets. If you had Earth at the center, you would have the moon next. You would have Mercury. You would have Venus, or Netzach here. You would have the sun, Tifereth here. You would have Mars, Geburah. You would have Jupiter, Hesed. And you would have Binah, Saturn, before you would get into the sphere of the fixed stars and zodiac, which is Hokmah, and then this sort of primum mobile of Kether. Right, so this is, I guess, kind of concatenated or linear version of that very same cosmological model, and it's one upon which we're building, and Mackey at least explicitly references it in his monitorial commentary. And you see here the central city is the city of the sun, just like in Campanella, just like in the Picatrix, the Ado-Sentin of the Picatrix. Mackey goes on to say the Masonic legend places the stone of foundation in the sanctum sanctorum of the second temple, but immediately beneath it in the first, and at that point is represented by the 9th arch. The stone of foundation was in the form of a perfect cube and had inscribed on its upper face within a delta or triangle the sacred tetragrammaton, or the ineffable name of God. He goes on to say, Enoch built a temple underground on Mount Moriah. This temple consisted of 9 vaults situated perpendicularly beneath each other and communicating by apertures left in each vault where the keystone position would be. Enoch then caused a triangular plate of gold to be made. On the plate, he engraved the true name of God, or the tetragrammaton, and placing it on the cubical stone, known thereafter as the stone of foundation, he deposited the whole within the lowest arch. So we've kind of gone backwards there, you see? So Enoch, the patriarch, first deposited this stone of foundation, which was cubical, having to do with matter, right? He deposited it in the lowest vault within the mountain. So this was on Mount Moriah, but in the vault within it, he deposited this cubical stone with the delta inscribed with the tetragrammaton in the lowest arch. And then there were 9 arches, each, as he says, with an aperture, sort of a keystone position missing in these arches. So during the first temple, the stone of foundation was elevated to the keystone of the first arch, the uppermost arch. And then during the second temple, it sat on top of that, with the surface of, the graded surface. It sat on grade, and it was within the sanctum sanctorum of the second temple. So let's talk about this, first, what this stone of foundation could be, right? So the cube is generally associated with materiality. It is also sometimes associated with the planets, as in the Sefer Yetzirah. So there's kind of 2 ways to look at that. If we look at it as representing Earth, if we look at it as representing the lowermost, densest sphere, like sodium chloride is a cubical form, iron pyrite is a cubical form. These are material elemental things, right? On top of those, you might have this triangle like we see in this diagram, which is an elemental sort of triangle on top of that. So, and then you would get to, the sphere of the sun, or Tifereth, or you would get into the planetary spheres after that. One other way of looking at this is Kabbalistically. Remember, we looked at that tree of life diagram. If this is the planets, if the cube, the stone of foundation, is planetary, then we can look at it differently. We can say that it is via the Sefer Yetzirah, which is a cosmological and cosmogonical, so it's talking about the creation of the cosmos as well. It's a proto-Kabbalistic document that assigns this cube, this spatial cube, to the planets. And the planets representing each one of the faces of this hexahedron, this cube. And within their midst is Saturn, because Saturn is time, and time is within the midst of this spatial cube. So there's a temporal and a spatial element. On top of that, you get this triangle, which is and I'll go back to the tree of life. You get this triangle. So if you have your cube here, imagine finishing this here, you could see the cube in it. You could see the cube that they're talking about. It's like a quarter view of a cube right here. On top of it, there is a delta, and this delta is the supernals. They call these the supernal Sephiroth, right? And they are Bina, Hokmah, and Keter. So yet another way to sort of see this model. Now, if on top of that, there were the 9 angelic hierarchies, the celestial hierarchies, orders of 9 angels, before you reach Tetragrammaton, you could readily see several ways of reading this as a cosmological model. You could also see it where if you were to elevate the stone of foundation, as in the first temple, to the keystone position of the first arch, you could see this as being 9 levels, i.e. Yesod, which is the 9th Sephirah, right? You could see these 9 levels before you end up in this planetary cube with, again, the supernal Sephiroth on top of that. Now, here's the Ptolemaic cosmos to kind of filter this information in with what we've discussed about these other 2 images, which is that's Luna, the sphere of the moon. Beneath that, in the sublunary sphere, are the 4 elements. You have Earth, and they're in their Aristotelian natural place. You have Earth, you have water on top of that, you have air on top, and then fire, the rarest of the states of matter. Because when I should clarify this, when we talk about the 4 Empedoclean elements, we're not we all know that the periodic table has 100 and something elements in it, whatever it is, 130 or however many they have. But I don't think they were talking necessarily about elements as we understand it, as much as they were talking about states of matter. So if the earth is a solid and water is liquid, then air is gas or vapor, and fire is plasma. So these are the 4 states of matter as we understand them today. We still talk about these 4 states of matter. And then there is what Aristotle posited as the quintessence, the 5th element, and that is ether. And the planetary spheres, not ether as in ethyl alcohol or that sort of not that sort of ether as we understand it. It was like AETHER, and it was a numinous kind of substance that did not appear in the sublunary sphere. We didn't have ether in this sphere. The planetary spheres were made out of ether, composed entirely of ether. And then you have these, look at these 9 levels right here, this rising through these 9 sort of apertures. In a Neoplatonic planetary ascent, you have the moon, Mercury, 3 would be Venus, 4 the sun, 5 Mars, 6 Jupiter, 7 Saturn, 8 the sphere of the fixed stars in the zodiac, and then 9 before you get to the primum mobile, which would be like Kether. Right? So these directly correspond to the Kabbalistic tree of life, and they directly correspond to a lot of what we're seeing in these cryptic degrees. Here's another thing Mackey says: the predominant idea of the deity in the Masonic system connects him with the creative and formative power. Those are pretty loaded words Kabbalistically, and we know that Mackey referenced the Kabbalah explicitly. So with his creative and formative power, God is to the Freemason Al-Gabil, the builder, or as expressed in his Masonic title, the grand architect of the universe. So we're talking about a demiurge here, first of all. There are Gnostic implications here if you're familiar with their cosmology. So that there is a builder, whether it's a Yalda Bayoth, whether it's a Yod-He-Vav-He, a celestial architect, a cosmologist or a cosmogonist who kind of made a builder who fashioned the cosmos, who wrought the cosmos, is something that, of course, is central to Freemasonry. This grand architect of the universe, the designer, the builder. So whether they're one and the same or not, both are present. So when they talk about creative and formative power here, I don't think Mackey would have not known about the creative and formative worlds as they pertain to the Tetragrammaton in the Kabbalistic system. So these worlds, again, go from rarity to density, manifest, asiya, having to do with Earth. So this is a standard Kabbalistic doctrine that there are 4 worlds, and they emanate downward from the most rare, the most archetypal, the most noetic, if you prefer, down to the most solid, the most manifest, and the most material. In between those two are the creative and formative worlds, right? So these would be associated with those sort of planetary spheres, this etheric astral kind of realm where Genesis would happen, where the cosmogonical sequence in the Hermetic Pymander would happen. You know, this is where the demiurgic activity happens. So for him to mention creative and formative power he's precisely talking about these two Kabbalistic worlds that are inherently demiurgic and also respond to that sort of Masonic idea of the demiurge, but also the Gnostic, Hermetic, and Abrahamic idea of a demiurge. Mackey says, although the present life is necessarily built upon the foundation of truth, yet we never thoroughly attain it in this sublunary sphere, he says. And you cannot say sublunary sphere without reference to cosmology, because that's precisely what we're talking about. That sublunary sphere is the sphere below the moon, the elementary sphere below the moon, as Aristotle and Ptolemy understood it. And again, I think we need to mention that these four states of matter, or these four Empedoclean elements, have everything to do with the Tetragrammaton in terms of their correspondences and associations, as we understand them in many esoteric traditions in the West, right? But Aristotle was I believe the first to place them in their order of natural place, which we've talked about a couple of times before, and I don't mind repeating because I think it's important. The solid terra, earth, in the center. Water rests upon the earth. What happens when you throw a pebble in a pond? It sinks to the bottom. This is just intuitive kind of reasoning. On top of water is air. What happens when there's air in the water? It bubbles up to the surface. So air bubbles to the surface. And of course, fire, ignis, of course, fire is lighter than air. Any hot air balloon. I know a lot of you brethren are in New Mexico right now. A lot of hot air balloons there. And, you know, that's a perfect example of fire or plasma being elementally more rarefied than air. So he is certainly, in his commentary, Mackey is certainly talking about this particular cosmological paradigm because it is present in the cryptic suite of degrees. Mackey says, to enter the celestial council, let me see what time it is real quick. Oh, I got some time. Mackey says, to enter the celestial council, where you will behold that divine stone of foundation on which rests eternal truth. Now, this is super cool because we are talking at this point about the pseudo-Dionysian angelic hierarchy, right? So there is a certain order, and it goes like this: angels at the lowest arch, if you will, angels, archangels. My mouse is being weird. Angels, archangels, principalities, powers, virtues, dominations, thrones, cherubim, and seraphim up here before you get to behold that divine stone of foundation on which rests eternal truth, as he says here. So enter this celestial council from this, you know, essentially planetary, zodiacal, sublunary, everything in that Ptolemaic cosmos is down here, because Pseudo Dionysius and Thomas Aquinas and all these people after him, Christian theologians in the Middle Ages and up through the Renaissance, I believe, would have put the planetary, zodiacal, and elemental spheres down here. On top of those, you have to go through these 9 arches. And Enoch sort of like presaged this. So, or you could say that Pseudo Dionysius kind of intuited this from Enoch's arches. Whether he had access to that apocryphal book or not, I'm not sure. I know the Ethiopians had it after the Council of Nicaea, or whenever it was that they nixed a lot of the apocrypha out of scripture. But if we understand the Aristotelian or Ptolemaic cosmological model to be down here, then on top of that are these 9 arches, which are the orders of angels. And Mackie is saying, you will, at the top of that, you will behold the stone of foundation upon which rests eternal truth. Now I'm going to go back a few slides and go back to this. Tell me you don't see that here. You know, tell me we don't see that in the first and second temple. The first temple, where it's located in the keystone position of this first or 9th arch, depending on where you're starting. And when it's in the sanctum sanctorum of the second temple, up at the top on grade, right? So you have precisely that cosmos, that Ptolemaic cosmos down here. You have 9 arches, and then you have you know, the ineffable abode of God, the primum mobile, as they called it in the Ptolemaic system. So there are many different ways to see this cosmological, these various, and all of them are accounted for at the various stages of the temple. When the temple was just the vault and the mountain, with these subterranean arches, these Enochian arches. And the stone of foundation was below at the lowest part of the arch. You see this sequential rise. You know, the stone of foundation is raised to the keystone position of the 9th or 1st arch, just below grade. And then in the second temple, it is on grade in the sanctum sanctorum. So the Kabbalistic approach, the Aristotelian physics, like with the Empedoclean elements, is represented there. The Ptolemaic cosmos is represented there. The Kabbalistic or proto-Kabbalistic Sefer Yetzirah is there. The Tree of Life, Dante's Paradiso, as we saw earlier, which shares a lot of that, you know, the Christianization of the theurgic ascent through these spheres. Now, if we look at this, we're still talking about the council of angels, the angelic hierarchies, 3 times 3 times, you know, it's 3 times 3, because there's 3 on this level, 3 on that level, and 3 up here. And 3 orders of angels assigned to each of these 3 grades. Above, what is this? I mean, it's, you know, matter. This is matter. This is material. This is elemental. This is the earth. Are we surrounded by 12 here? Could that be a zodiacal illusion? I mean, I'm just seeing that now. I didn't see this when I was putting this slideshow together, but it could be that we're talking about the sublunary sphere of the elements, matter, materiality, density. Then we're going through this this zodiacal sort of region, this etheric region, and then up through these angelic hierarchical grades, 3 times 3, as we see in the York Rite, and then finally, you know, attaining, you know, meeting the Godhead at this at the summit of this theurgical, this Neoplatonic ascent. And again, I just wanted to show this, another model, the 9 arches of the patriarch Enoch, the 9 arches with their apertures opened, the vault at the bottom, the top of the mountain, and the 9 sort of concentric arches, which are either angelic or Kabbalistically, they could be planetary and elemental, as we saw in the Tree of Life model. So and both of these, or pretty much all of these frames of reference cosmologically can be fitted to the work in the cryptic degrees. So here's the key takeaways, and I hope we have an active and lively Q&A, because I know some of this stuff is kind of abstruse information if you're not into cosmology or whatever. I mean, some of this stuff is semi-specialized, but I'm, and I don't claim to know everything about all of these topics, but I thought it was an interesting perspective to offer you brethren this morning or this afternoon, as a way of understanding that just as in philosophy and mythology and theology, there is an underlying cosmological model upon which other precepts are predicated, and that it is pretty fundamental and pretty central, just as it is present in theology, philosophy, and mythology. It is also present in initiatory rites like Freemasonry, like Mithraism. It's present in other orders as well, and it is microcosmically present specifically in the cryptic degrees. So here's what I hope to have shown you today, and this is the last slide. If you've never seen it before, I'd like to tell you there is an underlying cryptic as in hidden cosmology to the cryptic degrees. This cosmology consists of allusions to the Aristotelian physics, which would include the elements in their natural place, the Ptolemaic spherical model, which we saw, those planetary spheres emanating from the sublunary sphere all the way up to the primum mobile, the proto-Kabbalistic Sefer Yetzirah, which had that neat planetary cubicle model and had space-time, many, many years before the Cartesian coordinates were developed, and many, many years before more modern physical concepts like Minkowski space, and many, many years before relativity. So in that proto-Kabbalistic Sefer Yetzirah, we're talking about a spatial temporal model, which to me is mind-blowing. If you haven't read it, it's a short book, but definitely worth your time and effort. The tree of life, the Kabbalistic tree of life model, which I think first appears in either the Bahir or the Zohar. But we've looked at that model as being cosmological, and it's plainly and explicitly referenced by Mackey in regards to the cryptic degrees, as well as the pseudo-Dionysian celestial hierarchies, which essentially are 9 vaults or 9 arches, right? And then Dante's Paradiso, which kind of brings a lot of the Christianized ideas of this back home. And let me just say this, the cryptic degrees are thereby microcosmic, because they allude to the vault and the mountain in their cosmological sense. They frame the temple archetype as being a cosmological manifestation. So the temple is the cosmos. The temple is not only in man, in your heart, in your mind. It's not only present mnemonically because of all the stuff that we memorize as Masons. We have a mnemonic temple. It's not only represented as the egregorical temple, kind of our group projection as Masons, as we work in the physical temple downtown and work on our mnemonic temples in our mind, work in the temple that is man, the temple in our heart, etc., the celestial temple, the house not made with hands. There's this fractal expanse of the temple archetype, and the cryptic degrees have a microcosmic piece of that. The egregorical temple to which we all contribute as a group sort of projection as Masons. That's what I'm trying to get across with this. And this is the end of my presentation, and I'm going to hand it back over to Steve. And I really appreciate your time, and I really appreciate you guys allowing me to present for you this morning or this afternoon.
Thank you, Jaime. That was awesome. And now I will open it up to the floor. And we're off. Everybody, please go ahead and come off of mute and contribute.
Jaime, that was awesome. Thank you very much. That's a lot to unpack and to think about. And I appreciate you giving us your time.
Thanks, Reed. Yeah, it's you know, it's a unique perspective, but I think there's basis for it being present. I mean, I don't think it matters much whether we're applying an interpretive lens to that work that is cosmological and just seeing it for what it is, or whether we're more like inductively sort of, you know, we find it there and then we bring that out. But I think it's interesting. I think there are pretty tight correlative elements between the cryptic degrees and these certain cosmologies with which we're familiar and which we see elsewhere in other Western esoteric traditions. So I wanted to highlight that.
I think you did a really good job at that. It leaves me a lot to think about.
Well, you'll get more opportunities because I haven't like officially announced this yet, but on September 22nd, my third book comes out, and the title of that third book is The Archetypal Temple. So that little end thing that I was talking about, where the fractal expanse of this temple archetype, beginning at the smallest microcosmic level to the largest macrocosmic level, and all the grades and sort of levels of density and rarity in between, including the mnemonic temple, the physical temple downtown where lodges meet, you know, that there is an expanse of this archetypal temple, which is the title of the book. So that's September 22nd. So and then in fact, my article upon which this is based, or the essay that I wrote upon which this presentation is based, will be in that book as well. So I unpack it further in there. So if this sort of perspective interests you, my work's been going in that direction.
Jaime, I hadn't thought about your the structure that you've put together before, but it almost looks like you're taking the macroscopic vision of the microscopic model, which we normally think of as the model that falls within the 9 arches, the subterranean arches, and you're just reversing that and saying, well, the cosmological model is also in that same series of 9, which gets back to what is above is below, you know, and that sort of thing. And that was very, very clever. I had never thought about bringing that. You know, I always thought the keystones of the 9 arches represented attributes of deities, but they could also represent the messengers of deity, the angels, the archangels, and yeah, that's very, very well done.
Thank you, Most Worshipful. And yeah, I was hoping to kind of show that. And, you know, of course, there's actionable, as you kind of alluded to right there, there are actionable implications from that. When we look at the microcosm and the macrocosm, what is actionable about that is that you know, it is not just something, oh, that's neat, you know, but in the history of Western esotericism, if we go back to Hermeticism and Neoplatonism specifically, but also Christianity, we see a theurgical ascent. And we in fact allude to it in Freemasonry when we fit ourselves as living stones for that house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. And where do we do that? We do that in the terrestrial sphere. So we have the terrestrial sphere and the celestial spheres figured prominently atop the pillars in our lodges. And this is an allusion to the microcosm and the macrocosm. One exists inside of the other. It is cosmological. And I think that by the actionable actionable part is that we can, through our work as Masons, fit ourselves for a more rarefied temple above. And I think that might even be the central project of Freemasonry itself.
Sure. Yep.
Yeah, Jamie, I think you've touched upon something that probably doesn't apply to anybody that's been listening today, but there are many Masons who like to keep Freemasonry in a safe sinecure, a safe spot in their life, which is, it's just a fraction different from Freemasons working on stones. They don't want to take it to the next level. They want to ignore what is in the Holy Royal Arch. They want to the implications of that. They want to ignore what's written within the cryptic degrees, and in particular, like for example, our historical lecture. And I realize that, you know, we've had some people in cryptic masonry that may have taken some free reign but they've gone undisputed. It is said in the historical lecture that the ceremony of initiation, i.e. the first degree, the second and the third, but in particular first degree, your entrance into the lodge is based upon what occurred with, you know, to Zebat. That's been said, and you know, it's not disputed that that's in there, but most Masons kind of don't catch on to that. They hear that the ceremony of initiation, that this is founded upon this. They want to apply that back to being, oh, well, that's the way they do the select master degree, because they want to keep it at a safe level where it doesn't interfere with their life. And the problem is Masonry has to be lived, not just in good acts and good thoughts, but also in trying to reach that understanding of our relationship with the Creator. I think Bob has touched upon that in many of his works. Several people on this presentation have touched upon it in their writings and in their talks. So you know, where you've hit today is where I've always felt we should be, but again, it's probably not for every Mason, because that dues paying base probably isn't ready for this. But you know what? That's part of our job, is to be available to educate them about this and to bring them to that realization, and so that they can take that journey. I've always seen the cryptic degrees, and Bob Davis, unfortunately, has been subjected to these discourses by me. And he's pleasantly sat back and been very patient about listening to me about it. But I've always felt that the cryptic degrees have a greater significance and importance in the history of Freemasonry. Yeah, maybe not from the 1700s, but from that mythology or that legendary Masonry that predates all that. And that there was always a speculative element, even if there was some sort of interconnection with the guilds or with Freemasons that were more devoted to physical concerns, that there's always been something there that was symbolized by that, and that is why it has endured, is because that is there. But I just wish that in Freemasonry, we could feel a little, bring the membership to being more comfortable with the realization of these things, and not just oh, well, you know, Freemasonry is you know, it's this way to become a better man. Well, no, it's more than that. It's to become a better spirit, a better soul, a better part of creation. So thank you again for your talks. I always enjoy them.
Thank you, brother. You brought up a lot of points there. One thing I wanted to kind of qualify, at least from my perspective, is that when I bring up these things and my certain perspective from, you know, various esoteric vantage points, I'm not at all trying to say that you know, your typical Mason who comes in and is primarily concerned with philanthropy, fraternalism, and moral or character development. I believe those are central to what we do. And I, you know, in talking just right now with with Bob Davis was that, it might be our central project to become the best versions of ourselves, to become the most genuine and authentic expressions of ourselves. And you don't necessarily need Kabbalah and magic and astrology and tarot cards to do that. That's one thing that somebody might do. I mean, I'm not grafting that view on the craft. It's something I dabble in just because I have an interest in it, and Masons historically have always had an interest in those sorts of deeper doctrines and things like that. But I really want to hammer home that your typical Mason who shows up for philanthropy, fraternalism, and character development is a great Mason, and there are times when, to pull my own covers on this, there are times when I've blown off some of these more surface level things like moral rectitude. I'm not always the best version of myself. I'll screw up a lot, right? I'll screw up today. Before the end of the day, there'll be something that doesn't hit the mark. It doesn't hit my ideal. That will happen, so it's not like you want to skip philanthropy, fraternalism, and character development and just go straight for some highfalutin concept like Kabbalah, which does nothing unless you've done those other things. So I will never disparage the Freemason who's not interested in esotericism in the common sense that we use it today, just because it's not entirely necessary to get what we get out of Freemasonry, despite the fact that I write books about that. It's an interest of mine, and it's an interest of a certain demographic of Freemasons. I understand that, and I'm not saying this is the elite special forces of Freemasonry. No way am I saying that. So I just want to get that across,
John Bridegroom will have a pin for the special forces of Freemasonry by next week. I'm sure we'll have that on the General Grand Council store.
Jaime, Rubens has his hand raised, and we also have a question in the chat.
Okay, whoever wants to go first. I didn't read the chat.
Jaime, thank you all, and thanks for your amazing presentation. And my question is, there is a professor in Brazil, in the University of São Paulo. He studies brain, and the small gland, the pineal. Sorry, I'm not good in anatomy, but it's the epiphysis gland, I guess. There is some grains that is apatite. As a geologist, this is kind of phosphate mineral, so interesting. And a general understanding, not academical one, but that this structure and the organizing of these crystals inside this gland may be like a filter for the frequency of the, let's say, spiritual world. And I always understood the 9 arts like this change in the frequency by the like this would be like a Wi-Fi adjustment of frequency in order to understand the divine thoughts, let's say this way, and to convert in a way that our physical brain may properly understand what we are capturing from what's around us. I always made this kind of correlation. You presented to me today this cosmological point of view, but my question is, do you understand that this also we could have some kind of the arts would be like a kind of filter to us to capture in the innermost part of our brain this perception of the spiritual world or different dimensions that each arc may represent?
Certainly. And I think that just as we talk about scripture being the 7 seals of scripture you sometimes see that in Christian iconography, the book is closed with 7 seals. So there are 7, that's been interpreted as 7 levels of interpretation, which may be applied to scripture to get deeper meaning. I bring this up as an analogy because when we think about these 9 arches, there can be a cosmological sort of interpretive perspective. There can be a biological, or the, you know, you brought up the endocrine system. So in the West, we talk about the endocrine system. You have, you know, various glands that run up the length of the body, essentially. In the East, of course, they refer to these as chakras. I don't know anything about Eastern philosophy or religion. I've never studied it, not very interested in it, but in the Western tradition, we do emphasize ever since Egypt and Babylon, they've emphasized various aspects of the endocrine system, particularly the pineary and pituitary glands. So not my area of expertise, but yes, I have heard of what you're talking about, Rubens, and I appreciate the question. But yes, I would say that's one interpretation, as is the cosmological, as is, you know, the character development, that we go through stages of bettering ourselves as a man and becoming, you know, that stone of foundation, that cubical ashlar with the delta inscribed. And, you know, there's lots of ways to look at that. And I think many of them are valid. Thanks for the question. Who else we got?
Before Byron, we've got a question. Greg Davis, so that I don't misrepresent your question, do you want to come off mute and ask the question?
Yeah, that's fine. Can you hear me?
Yes,
we can.
Okay. I said, I know you've talked about astrology, astronomy, and cosmology, and a couple of different presentations that I've seen. But how would you relate that split from the differences in astronomy to astrology and cosmology, and to maybe the different splits of the appendant bodies?
Okay, I think I understand what you're saying. I have an interesting perspective on that. Is the idea of hermeticism, the idea of the micro and the macro and their resonant relationship, the idea that we see in the Blue Lodge as the globes surmounting the 2 pillars, the terrestrial sphere and the celestial sphere, on earth as it is in heaven, you know, on the terrestrial temple as it is in the house not made with hands. And that resonant hermetic relationship, it's a sympathy, just like you know, you get with various tones, like you get a certain tone from the television set that vibrates your speakers a certain way because there's a sympathetic resonance there. So the idea, the hermetic idea, is that there is a resonance between the micro and the macro. And I say this because that is what separates astrology from astronomy. That is what separates alchemy from chemistry. That is what separates, arguably, operative from speculative Freemasonry. And let me qualify this. Astrology is to astronomy as alchemy is to chemistry, as speculative Masonry is to operative Masonry. Here's what I mean. Both astrology and astronomy measure and calculate the movement of celestial bodies and the nature of the cosmos and things. Both of them do that, but astrology has the accompanying hermetic belief that those movements and cycles and epicycles have an effect in the terrestrial sphere, the effect in the microcosm man, right? And in alchemy and chemistry, both alchemy and chemistry deal with operations done in the lab, you know, the retort, the crucible, the athanor, etc. Except alchemy differs from chemistry in that there is the accompanying hermetic belief that those operations that occur in the retort and the alembic, etc., have a simultaneously corresponding operation in the alchemist internally, in his psyche or in his spirit somehow. There's a resonant hermetic relationship. And the same with operative Masonry and speculative Masonry. Both operative and speculative Masons use the vernacular, the hierarchical structure of the craft, the you know, the legends and things like that. Both of them use this, but the speculative Mason arguably differs from the operative Mason generally, in that the speculative Mason believes that there is an internal transformation going on by which we are elevated to the celestial temple. Whereas if you're just an operative workaday stonemason, that might not necessarily, it might not necessarily be the case, you know, where it has this speculative hermetic component. So to reduce that to one formula, I would say astrology is to astronomy, as alchemy is to chemistry, as speculative masonry is to operative masonry. And what differentiates them is that hermetic sympathetic component between the microcosm and the macrocosm. So I hope that kind of, I forget it now. That was such a long answer. I don't even remember what the question was. I'm sorry for that.
That pretty much answered it. But do you see us a relation in the higher degrees as a return to like a cosmology where everything's in the mix, and as opposed to in the Blue Lodge where it's a foundational type of education, but as you get into the higher degrees, you tend to have to homogenize everything together?
I think that Mackey would say that yes, those 9 degrees up to select master form the, up until you receive the true word. He said in one of those quotes that I provided that he believes that to be the entirety of the system, and that's the beginning and the end, these 9 grades, these 9 degrees, and that is the perfect circle of Masonic teaching according to Mackey. I'm not sure if I necessarily agree or disagree with that. I haven't made a value judgment on that, but I can say that by applying, you brought up astrology, cosmology, and astronomy, etc. So I'll reference that by saying, when I look at the 3 Blue Lodge degrees, I can certainly apply that same lens, particularly to the 3rd degree, the second half of the 3rd degree. There is a very interesting, if you've never looked into it, there's a very interesting interpretation of the second half of the 3rd degree, which has to do with one annual solar circuit. So that is to say the sun through all 12 signs of the zodiac, and the seasonal kind of equinoctial and solstitial points are represented in this really interesting allegorical scheme. The first place I know that showed up, it was in Robert Hewitt Brown's Stellar Theology and Masonic Astronomy. So if you are interested in that viewpoint, and it sounds like you are, I would say get Robert Hewitt Brown's Stellar Theology and Masonic Astronomy, and then those very same principles can be applied to certainly the Royal Arch and the Council. So, and the Royal Arch, just to quickly throw one in there, you have the 4 veils, the 4 tribes, which are the 4 fixed signs of the zodiac. You have Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius, represented by those animals, the tetramorph, essentially, the cherubim from Ezekiel's vision, the tetramorph from John the Revelator, John of Patmos. It's the same 4 creatures. They're Babylonian. They were called the Lamassu. They were a sphinx. And this is not, you know, new agey weird stuff. This is like, you could look this up. This is how the lineage of these 4 fixed signs came into Christian symbolism, and we have it in the York, the Royal Arch. Those 4 on the banners, those 4 animals representing the Christian tetramorph.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Byron, good to see you.
Good to be here. Now, I'm gonna play with the Bible a little bit. Jamie reminded me something, so I'm gonna read you a few verses.
Okay.
And the disciples came, this is out of St. Matthew chapter 13, starting at verse 10. And the disciples came and said unto him, why speakest thou unto them in parables? He answered and said to them, because it is given unto you to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, not, but to them it is not. You know, as I said, the mysteries,
Mhm.
they even talk about the mysteries in the Bible. For whoever has, let's see, for whosoever has to him shall be given, and he shall have more abundance. But whosoever has not, from him shall be taken away even that he has. Therefore I speak to them in parables, because they see not, and hearing, they hear not, neither do they understand. And from that I got the fact, I come to the conclusion, everything is not meant for everybody. Like you were saying about, you know, different strokes for different folks, it's not meant for everybody. But for those that it's meant for, they will get it, they will see it, and they appreciate it. Those that it's not meant for, you never get it across to them. And I want to applaud you for putting out there something that, for those of us that do want to hear it and see it, thank you.
Thank you, brother Byron. Yeah, it's you know, and again, just to qualify that from my perspective, not to say that this esoteric kind of interpretation is necessary for everybody, but you know, echoing what Byron just read, you know, it's a perfectly valid and viable trajectory to just say, I'm going to be, you know, a good person. I'm going to work on character development. I'm going to work on philanthropy, and I'm going to work with being a good brother to my brethren, you know, the fraternal aspect, which, you know, but yes, Byron, I do believe in, it says in our obligation, at least in the jurisdictions where I've lived, that we are to keep inviolate the hidden mysteries of Freemasonry, and that's capital, I believe it's capital H, capital M, hidden mysteries of Freemasonry. So capitalize to, you know, to do just that, to highlight their importance, the mysteries of Freemasonry, the mysteries of the craft, like the mystery of the third degree that we experience in the legend, and the mysteries that are in our allegories and our symbolism, that you know, there are many veils and there are many ways to interpret the material, some more superficial, some a little more deeper doctrine, but it's a fascinating system that you know, that it provides so much for such a cross section of men, you know. Thank you, brother. That all we got?
Anybody else?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, first of all, thank you, Jeremy, for an outstanding lecture. As someone who finds boiling water esoteric, the lecture was a real reach for me in complete understanding, but that has nothing to do with the validity of the lecture, obviously. But getting to the point that you and Bill were making, I think it's important that this type of information, these differing perspectives on Masonry, is made available for people to view, because I think one of the biggest challenges that we have in the craft is exposure to this type of understanding and perspectives on what we do. It may not be for everybody. It may not necessarily correlate with their world views, but it's important to be exposed to it so that you are challenged to look at things from different perspectives. You know, a trowel at the lowest value can be seen as many different things and have many different meanings. And I think that, again, having the opportunity to avail yourself of these differing viewpoints and perspectives on the craft are vitally important, and I greatly appreciate it.
I agree, brother, and I appreciate the encouragement in kind of investigating these, I guess, frankly, sort of fringier ideas. I mean, I think, you know, you do bring up an interesting point in research that I believe I see Freemasonry as a living, developing tradition, not merely some static structure to be autopsied and surveyed historically, merely from that level. I believe Freemasonry is something alive and potentially evolving and becoming really more of itself in a lot of ways as a system, right? So if Freemasonry is approached as a living, viable tradition that we still practice, then why would we not have a forward-looking, avant-garde kind of face to our research? So yes, you could look backward in the stream of time and say, this is what happened at the, you know, with the Regis poem, or this is what the Hallowell manuscript, or, you know, Anderson's constitutions, and dissect these things and pick them apart. And that's great. We need that sort of academic type historical research, because it helps to fortify our foundation as Masons. But we also need new interpretations. We also need a new envisioning of the work and carrying that forward. And I think my sort of small place in that has been more interpretive, more of a, you would say, a hermeneutic approach, which means to sort of apply different lenses of interpretation to find deeper meaning in a subject. So I believe there's a place for different modes of research, you know?
I agree with you 100%.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks again, Reed and Steve and everybody for hanging out this morning or this afternoon. And I hope, you know, get in touch with me if a question comes to you later. You know, I'm easy to find. You know, there's my website. If you go to my website here, I'll put it in here. I'll put it in the chat real quick, and then,
Yeah, put it in the chat.
all right.
Yeah, I was going to ask you to do that.
And there's links to my books in there as well.
Thanks again, Jamie, for a very educational and entertaining presentation.
Thank you, Reed.
Taking your time to do that for us today.
Yeah. It's the least I could do. It's the least I could do for the craft that has given me so much. I'm putting a couple links in before we close up, so just give me a second if anybody wants to copy these links.
You've also gotten some praise in the chat that you probably haven't had a chance to read. Thank you so much. Thanks for the enlightening program. Onion layers of knowledge. Thanks, Jamie, for the wonderful opportunity. Awesome presentation.
There's no rotten tomatoes of knowledge, just layers of onions. I don't know. I'm just
No, nothing but praise.
okay. There, I put up my last two books and I put up my website. So if anybody's interested, and the website has a contact thing as well, so you could reach out to me. And I'm always happy to talk about my work and the craft in general with all the brethren.
All right, Jamie, one last thank you. And then what we're going to do is we're going to stop all of the background stuff. Okay, we should be good. And I was just getting rid of the I'm trying to get rid of the live stream. But
It's taken on a life of its own.
you know, it might have.
Skynet now owns it.
We could run, but we can't hide.
Should I stop the recording and that might stop the live stream?
I thought I did stop the recording. Go ahead and stop it on your end if it has not stopped.
Yeah, you didn't stop it.
All right. Let's see if I can transfer the actual host. Monty, you got controls, or do you want me to go to?
I'm on my phone.
All right, Reed. I'm going to see if it'll let you become host.
Okay.
Did it give you the ability to stop the live stream?
No, it just says view stream on YouTube or copy stream link.
Okay. Well, I've been bouncing in and out with network issues, so I'll leave and come back in. One of you guys is going to end up.
Did he leave prematurely?
It says he's still on, but he could have.
He was having some power issues, I think.
Yeah. Well, the recording's been stopped, but the live stream's still going.
Well, if we all hop off, it'll end, right?
True.
Okay.
Okay, Reed, you the host now.
I am. Is there any final comments for Jamie?
Yes, thank you again for participating, Jamie, and everybody else that took the time to be here. It's most appreciated. And for those that are going to the triennial session, hope to see you there.
Yeah, many thanks again to everybody, and also get in touch with me. I usually fly out at least 6 times a year to lodges and things like that. You know, to do speaking stuff and whatever. If you ever wanted an education program, or you know, if you're in Arizona or wherever, you know, I like to do that sort of thing. So keep me in mind if you ever get an opportunity for something like that. I'd be happy to come visit.
Jamie, when the gremlins come out, you know you did good.
Thank you, Byron. All right, we'll see you guys. I'm going to log off.
You've got a few more thank yous and great presentations in the chat.